Welcome to another episode of From Broken to Floatin' by marinepartssource. We're still working on this old pontoon boat. In our last episode, we installed control cables and a new engine control. And in this episode, we're going to be working on the fuel system, rebuilding carburetors and installing a fuel sender on the fuel tank. One important maintenance step we wanted to do with our pontoon boat is to really check the fuel system and make sure that it's in good operation. What we're going to do is overhaul the carburetors in the engine. This particular engine is a two-stroke engine. It's 3 cylinders and it has 3 carburetors. So we're just going to take each one apart, clean them up, put a new carb kit in each one, and then reassemble and install them. So the first thing we're going to be doing is just taking a razor blade and cleaning off all the gasket material around the surface of the carburetor. And then we'll be removing the carburetor bowl. And again, just cleaning off all the surfaces. We want to make sure that they are clean of any kind of debris. This whole step of cleaning your carburetors and overhauling them is really important, especially on a 2-stroke motor, because each of these carburetors can operate independently. But if there's any kind of clogging in one, even though 2 may be operating correctly, it can cause some really serious damage to the power head. So it's important that you know the status of your carburetors and that you have overhauled them correctly and thoroughly. And we'll also take some carburetor cleaner and spray into the nozzle where the fuel is going through. Make sure that the fluid can pass through and is not clogged in any kind of way. So as you can see, we're just putting the carb cleaner through to make sure that all of the orifices are easy to pass through. Cleaning up the surface again. Wiping out any kind of residue that might be in there. It's also important that you are paying close attention to each seal or gasket and where it's placed inside the carburetor as you take it apart. We have a parts list that has an exploded view of each gasket and seal and each part inside the carburetor, and it's a good rule of thumb to have one on hand as you're doing this so that you can recall where each piece goes. Now we're working on the body of the carburetor itself, and once again just cleaning off all of those surfaces using a razor blade, wiping off any kind of debris so that you got a clean surface to work on. And now we're going to pull out the float, needle and seat. Now we're just balancing the float on the needle and seat. And we're going to measure the depth of the float. Again, it's a good rule of thumb that when you're taking the carburetor apart that you measure the depth of the float where it sits, because it is adjustable, and then when you put the new float on you want to make sure that it's sitting in that same spot. And now we're just going to reassemble the carburetor, putting the bowl back on. And when you turn it, you should hear the float moving back and forth inside the carburetor. If something's wrong and the float isn't making a noise and isn't moving when you turn it back and forth, then you know that it isn't assembled properly. Now we're going to be reinstalling the carburetors onto the engine. The top 2 we are just installing right onto the intake. As we attach the fuel lines using a zip tie that has a special tooth on the end of it so that it will bite into the fuel line and hold it in place. And you can find these zip ties on our website, as well as all of the components that can be used to rebuild the carburetors. The final carburetor is mounted onto this air intake shield. So we'll put gaskets for each carburetor on the mounting bolts where that air intake shield is going to line up against them. That third one is a little bit tricky to fit into place. It will just take some time and patience. Finally, we're just putting this plastic casing over the top that protects debris from getting inside. And we've completed the reinstallation of the carburetors. After this, we're going to move on to installing the fuel tank lines. And next, we're going to be drilling a hole for the fuel feed hose. This is the hose that will be running to the engine from the tank. So we'll just thread that through the hole that we've drilled. Now we can connect that to the valve that's on the top of the tank. Clamp it down. After that, we want to drill a hole for the fuel tank vent. And we just thread the vent into that hole. On the other side, there's a bolt to secure it in place. You want to make sure that you are angling that vent down so that it won't catch any rain. Once that's tightened, you can then connect the vent hose and clamp that into place. And then we'll connect that vent hose to the tank and clamp it as well. It's very important to make sure that your tank is properly vented so that it doesn't have any expansion or failure in the future. Now, we did find that the sender for this tank had failed, so we're replacing it with a new one. You can use a swing arm style sender like what we have here. You'll just want to make sure that it's the proper depth for the tank that you have. And if you want to identify if your sender is working or if there's another issue perhaps with the gauge, you can refer to our earlier video that we've posted, which details how to test the sender and gauge. If you have any questions about proper installation or maintenance of the components in your fuel system on your boat, just give Marine Parts Source a call. Our ABYC certified experts can certainly help you. The number is 866-388-0390. You can find us online at marinepartssource.com. Now, please don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel and stay tuned for more great installations of our From Broken to Floating series, where we'll be doing some more maintenance on this pontoon boat and soon getting it on the water.